that were all over the news this year and last year. So the issue is they're going after everybody, and they're telling the third world the cap and trade will hurt the greedy Americans and British and Germans and French, selling it to them as a divide and conquer strategy, when really this is an attack against everyone, as the British Commission on Population stated.
Well, what you need to understand is from the point of view of the bankers and the globalists, the people they want to die and leave the planet are those who work the least while consuming the most. The ones who will be kept alive are those willing to work the hardest and expect and demand the least amount in return. The ultimate agenda for any government in history is to extract the most work product from their population for the least amount of support going back. So if you're willing to work 80 hours a week for a loincloth and a bowl of rice, you are much more valuable to the bankers than somebody who works, flex time 25, 30 hours a week and wants to drive a BMW.
You're absolutely right. And let me read a quote from the UN dais, Maurice Strong, 1992, Rio de Janeiro, head of the Earth Summit. Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Then another quote by key agent of the Rockefeller family, Dr. Richard Day, the national medical director of the Rockefeller-sponsored Planned Parenthood, told a meeting in March of '69 that American industry will be sabotaged and shown to be uncompetitive. He said the stated plan was that different parts of the world would be assigned different roles of industry and commerce in a unified global system. The continued preeminence of the United States and the related independence and self-sufficiency of the United States would have to be changed. In order to create a new structure, you first have to tear down the old, and American industry was one example of that. Each part of the world will have a speciality and thus become interdependent, he said. The U.S. will remain the center for agriculture, high-tech communications, and education, but heavy industry would be transported out. Now, this is all stated thousands of different places in hundreds of different ways, but the issue here is that they're doing all this to make us dependent on government. They are stating this. This is such a criminal hijacking. This is neo-feudalism. This is serfdom. These people are mortal enemies of anyone that wants freedom and liberty. And remember how they throw this in our face through movies, which they now admit they're funding. Rollerball, 1974, where you have the different energy cities. Because once the globalists have a world government, they're even going to break it into sub-regions. And that's their plan. I mean, it is so unbelievably wicked, Mike Rivero.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically, again, and every time I hear the phrase global government, the first thing I think of is that's what Alexander the Great wanted. That's what Napoleon wanted. That's what the Roman Caesars wanted. That's what Hitler wanted. And in the middle of all this empire building, the ordinary people who just wanted to be left alone to live their lives and raise their children were crushed. There has never been a push for global government that did not involve the complete enslavement of the common people. As you say, this is neo-feudalism. They're trying to end the American Republic, the democracy experiment, and take us back to enforced serfdom. We will be attached to the land, will be considered part of the wealth of the land, and there will be titles of nobility to those who control large tracts of land. It's going back to the 12th century politically. And we're already seeing this in our own government that has abandoned the presumption of innocence. You have to prove that you're innocent now or you wind up being tortured until you confess something. I mean, even the Magna Carta said you're not allowed to do that. And our government has gone back before that in the way that they're handling the prisoners from these wars.
Mike, you're absolutely right. And my film, Fall of the Republic, details how the establishment is carrying this operation out. I don't see this working for the establishment, though. Sure, they can claim they control all issuance of currency and credit. They can try to restrict people's resources to control them. They can try to force one-child policies. But as the public learns about the shadow government, as they learn about the private Federal Reserve, as they learn about the real paradigm, which this oppression will encourage them to do, and is happening now, resistance is going to mount. That's why they preemptively, in their own documents, admitted this is neo-serfdom, feudalism, and that they're bringing in this electronic police state straitjacket. But I don't see that succeeding as well. This is going to be explosive.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're getting that this is moving along anywhere near as smoothly as they wanted. First of all, for the foundation that was resting on global warming, the fact that the Earth is cooling has damaged the credibility of the globalist movement as a whole. The same thing with attempting to sell a global health authority on the basis of the swine flu. That's not coming out as predicted. And selling more globalism to fix the economy that was already destroyed by globalism, that's a tough sell. I don't think they can make it. I think they may actually just bring down all of civilization in a ruin trying to bring about this new world order.
You're right. And they have corrupt bureaucrats running the system. And so they're having a lot of problems. Stay there, Mike. We'll talk about government drug dealing. We've got an abbreviated show today with Mike, but he'll be back up with us in the near future. Mike, in closing in this short segment, I want to get into government drug dealing in Afghanistan and Colombia. But first, Al Gore, again, admittedly to make the profits from all of this. This is racketeering. I mean, he should get in trouble for this. We need to really start calling them out as the criminals they are.
We absolutely need to do that. What most people don't understand is when Al Gore set up this cap and credit CO2 tax scheme, he got help from Ken Lay from Enron. In other words, Al Gore is doing to us with carbon dioxide what Enron did to California with electricity. They're not actually doing anything that's useful. They're simply setting up a system that siphons money off and makes them very, very, very rich. Yes, it's a crime. It's a scam. And as long as we, the people, just sit there and go along with it, there has to be a breaking point at some time. I mean, I've got friends who are calling me asking to borrow money to make their rent. I'm having to tell them, no, we're just barely making our rent here. At some point, when enough people have been made homeless and enough businesses have been shut down, the American people have got to get angry. There really is no other,
well, that's what Northcom's for, and we now know this was all premeditated and planned. Goldman Sachs engineering it with the Federal Reserve to collapse the economy. That's McClatchy Newspapers. We got the reporter coming on later. But in closing here, what about the treaty to build giant bases in Colombia to attack Venezuela? The U.S. forces only spray the coca plantations that the FARC control. Our government's growing the cocaine. Afghanistan, it's up 10, 12, 13-fold what it was a decade ago, opium. They admit in the news that the CIA runs the drugs with the head drug dealer. Meanwhile, the police are still SWAT teaming people for using the drugs the government ships in. What about, I mean, it's just all of this stuff's coming to the surface, but no one gets in trouble.
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, basically, the war on drugs is simply a war on the competition's drugs, and they want to make sure it's a monopoly that is controlled by the American drug lord families, including the Bushes and the Clintons, and that's what it's really all about. When the Taliban was in control of Afghanistan, there was no opium growing. The U.S. comes in, it's bumper crops, we've got cheap, potent heroin flooding into the United States. It's Vietnam all over again. Young people are dying from overdoses, and our government is making the money from it. That's why all these anti-drug commercials you see on TV are lame. They don't work. They're designed to make it look like the government cares, but they're designed to utterly fail to convince anybody to stay away from drugs.
Well, look at all the pro-drug messages in Hollywood movies where it's so fun. We know that's government propaganda placement, and it's on record. Every cop I talk to, whether I'm in L.A. or New York or Austin, I talk to cops when I see them at restaurants, and I go, don't you guys know most of the money is laundered from drugs, is laundered in U.S. banks, and that we only go after the competition? They go, yeah, we know that. But then they get promoted when they bust some teenager with it. By making the drugs illegal, it jacks up the prices, brings more drugs in, bad quality drugs. We know under Prohibition, alcoholism tripled. That's admitted, mainline history. We know it energized the mob. The criminals made drugs illegal because they wanted to jack up the price.
That's exactly right. They call it the politics of contraband. And, I mean, the prohibition, the amount of money that came in from prohibition to the criminals completely reshaped American politics. The whole Kennedy dynasty is founded on illegal alcohol money. The Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University was funded with opium money. It's all about drugs and control of the drugs. Hollywood always says the drug lords are down in South America. No, the drug lords are right here in the United States of America, sitting in taxpayer-funded offices.
And they have the U.S. military. If you don't pay your cut or launder your money with them, and I've talked to high-level military DEA people that track the flights, they're told, leave those 10 flights alone, go after those 2. Every time they bust the CIA with drugs in the U.S., they're told, let them go. I've had Terry Reid and other high-level CIA people on the show about Mina seeing Bill Clinton and Oliver North with the cocaine. And then they call them big patriot heroes.
Yeah, it is really absurd. I mean, all the excesses that we were told were happening down in South America, they happen times 10 here in the United States. It is that completely out of control. And now the druggies, they want to buy themselves an entire planet because the drug lords and the drug money and the banks are all tied in together. If the drug money went away, most American banks would collapse.
And let's explain this. They can leverage on average 8 to 10 times. So $500 billion in opium a year out of Afghanistan, that's $5 trillion leverage. Go ahead.